Seches Yevamos Daf Gimel continues the Gemara's analysis of the linguistic problems in our first Mishnah. After clearing up three linguistic issues, the Gemara then moves on to discuss the source of the halacha in the Mishnah, and will give the limud for all the 15 halachas we've seen, and then go on to question the rules of why we need a source altogether. So the Gemara is working on the language of the Mishnah. It has three linguistic issues. First of all, the one that we're in the middle of is why are the 15 women that don't fall to Yibam, why are they listed in the order in which they are presented? Trying to figure out the order. The Gemara is going to reject one approach and accept second approach. Then the Gemara will discuss the next linguistic issue, which is why it says that they are potros, that they release, that they don't have an obligation, it should say osos, that they're forbidden to do Yibam. Afterwards, the Gemara will clear up why it says a number, why does it have to give the number 15, and why does it have to sum up and say these are the ones that are asur. Then the Gemara will get into the source of these 15 women. So again, let's begin. We're discussing the halacha that there are 15 types of women that can be married to someone's brother, and when that brother will die, then they will fall to Yibum, but they cannot do Yibum because they are a forbidden relationship to the man to which they are falling. They can do Yibum to other brothers though. So, for example, Ruvain is married to a woman. Ruvain dies without children. That woman is a relation to Shimon, the brother, and therefore they are putter from Yibum. Shimon does not do Yibum with them. If there's a kohaif, the kohaif can't do Yibum either. If that kohaif then goes and gets married to a third brother, does Yibum to a third brother, and that third brother has another wife, so that's a kohaif's kohaif, that one is also going to be putter from Yibum if they fall to Yibum again to Shimon, meaning if the third brother, who will call Levi, if he dies, and then they both fall to Yibum, then the kohaif, then the kohaif and the kohaif's kohaif all fall to Yibum, and they are not obligated to do Yibum, and they are forbidden to do Yibum or Chalitza because they are the kohaif of an erva, one of the 15 forbidden relations, and the kohaif of an erva. So the Gemara wants to know why did the Mishnah list it in the order in which they are listed. The Gemara has already been discussing a few options. So the Gemara's latest attempt is that we wanted to list the ones which are more beloved first. And the one that's more beloved is the one that we learned from a drasha. So the Gemara now asks, if that's true, that the one that you learned from a drasha is first because that's more beloved that you had a drasha, then the one which is not a drasha should be last. And the only one that's not a drasha is Achos Ishto, that is his wife's sister. That is, if Reuven is married to the sister of the wife of Shimon, and therefore when he dies without children, the woman falling to Yibum to Shimon is Shimon's wife's sister. That it says explicitly in the Torah, or at least that's where we learn. From there to all the other relations that there is no mitzvah of Yibum in that scenario, that one should be listed last. But it's not listed last, it's listed in the middle. So the Gemara says, well, maybe really the reason is the method in which we organize the 15 relations on the list is in the order of what's most beloved because of drasha, but the sister, the wife, is stuck in because it's in the context of other sisters. Just before her, we have Shimon's sister from his mother's side, that they share only a mother, and therefore she was not related to Levi. And we have Shimon's mother's sister. So we have two sisters, and then we list the third sister, which is Shimon's wife's sister. So that's why it's listed there. So Gemara says that would be nice, but that still doesn't answer the question, because you could list all three of those at the end. That entire group of three could be the last three on the list, and then you could have the wife's sister being last, which is what you said you wanted, because it's the only one that's not a drasha. So therefore the Gemara rejects this entire approach to say that the method of organizing the 15 relations on the list was by which one was most beloved, because which one was a drasha. And the Gemara therefore says that there's a different method in which they're organized, and that is the order of relations. The closer relations are listed first, and the further relations are listed later, with a couple of exceptions when you have similarities. Now, the order of relations are as follows. A child is considered the closest relation. Grandchild is included in that. Then there's a sibling, that's the next closest relation after that, and then there's ones that are not directly related to you, but a relation of one's son or a relation of one's brother. Therefore, the order is as follows. The first three that are mentioned are Shimon's daughter or his granddaughter, so that's his daughter, his daughter's daughter, and his son's daughter. Once we mentioned that, we mentioned his wife's children as well, because of the similarity that they're both children. Once we mentioned his wife's children, we then mentioned his wife's parents, so that's his wife's mother and his wife's two grandmothers. Those are all mentioned together. That's all relations that are direct, the closest relations to him, that's his children, and of course what is it similar to that. Then we go to his siblings. So the next thing on the list, therefore, is his own sister. Once we're mentioning a sister, we mention his mother's sister and his wife's sister. Those will go together because they are similar. What comes afterwards are his brother's wife. And there's two ways that his brother's wife don't fall to Yibum. That's if it's his brother who is his brother from his mother's side, it doesn't fall to Yibum. That's a bit of a funny scenario. That means that there was a woman who was married to Shimon's brother from his mother, who then that marriage broke up either by divorce or death, and then he went and married Shimon's brother from his father, and then fell to Yibum. So he's blocked from doing Yibum because this woman is his former brother from his mother's wife, is the former wife of his mother from his brother. That's something that is not taken down by Yibum, and therefore blocks the other Yibum relation. So in a case like that, that is a relation based on his brother. We also have, if the brother did not live at the same time as the brother who died, that would be if the wife that's falling to him, the Yevama that's falling to him, was also the wife of another brother who did not live at the same time as Reuven, who died now and created the Yibum Isser. Either way, these are relations of the brother's wife. So these are really should be listed after the daughter-in-law, which is the son's wife, right? Because the brother's wife, a brother is considered a more distant relation than a son. So a brother's wife should really be considered to be a more distant relation than a son's wife. However, we're on the list of siblings here. We've discussed the sisters, so then we go to the brothers. And that's why that's listed next. And then afterwards, the last one on the list is the daughter-in-law. That's the wife of the son. And that's why that's all the way at the end. So that clears up this linguistic issue, which is the order. The Gemara now goes on to its next linguistic issue, which is why does it use the word potros? Potros means that these women are not obligated to do chalitza or yibum, but it shouldn't say they're not obligated, it should say they're not allowed to, because once they're not obligated, the mitzvah of yibum doesn't exist. They now have the isser of being the brother's wife, because they are the wife of Reuven. They therefore cannot marry Shimon unless it's yibum, and there's no yibum, so it's forbidden. It's an isser charis. So the Gemara says we couldn't use the word osos. We couldn't say it's forbidden, because that would mean that it's forbidden to do yibum, but it would imply that they're obligated to do chalitza, because all you're telling me is that forbidden. Forbidden only applies to yibum. Only yibum's forbidden, so that would mean that they're obligated to do chalitza, and it's not true, because any woman who doesn't have a mitzvah of yibum does not have to do chalitza. So the Gemara says, well, that's simple. Why don't we just say that it's forbidden for them to do yibum and forbidden for them to do chalitza? The Gemara says forbidden to do chalitza. How can it be forbidden to do chalitza? Chalitza is just take off the shoe. There's no isser in chalitza. The Gemara says no, there is. Midrabanan, we do not allow a woman to do chalitza if she's not allowed to do yibum, and that's because if people will see that she's doing chalitza, they'll think she was obligated in yibum, and then the next time a scenario like this happens, they may tell her to do yibum, and that would be aser. So you learn a wrong halacha. So in order to avoid confusion, anyone who can't do yibum doesn't do chalitza, and it's aser. So therefore, we could clearly say that it's aser. We should use the term aser and say it's forbidden them to do yibum midaraisa. It's forbidden them to do chalitza midarabanan. So the Gemara therefore says that we need another approach. This cannot be the reason that we didn't say osros. And we have another approach, and that says if we would have said that these women are osros, that would mean that they make it forbidden for their tzara, for their co-wife, to do yibum as well. Again, what that means is, as we've seen in the Mishnah, is that if any of these relations are falling to yibum to Shimon, if they had a co-wife, there's another woman who is married to Reuven together with them, that co-wife is also not allowed to do yibum, and is also patur from doing yibum or chalitza to Shimon. The problem is that if we say that the erva the woman who is forbidden, that she also asers her co-wife, it would imply that the fact that she's a co-wife with the co-wife, the fact that there's an erva that's a co-wife to the second woman, that's what makes her aser, not because they're falling to yibum together. That would lead me to the following wrong halacha. Let's say you have two women that are co-wives to a random individual. Two women are co-wives to Adam, and then Adam dies. There's no mitzvah of yibum here. So one of those women is an erva, so she cannot now marry Shimon. Let's say if she's Shimon's daughter, she cannot marry Shimon. However, the co-wife can, because she has no relation to Shimon at all. But we may think, we said, that the fact that they are a co-wife of an erva makes them usher. So we may think then that the co-wife in the marriage to Adam now makes them usher to marry Shimon. That's not true. And to prevent us from making that halacha, we don't want to say that a co-wife asers the tzara. So we just say that the co-wife makes it putter, that there's no mitzvah of yibum. The issur that's involved is generated by the fact that now she's a brother's wife in a case where there's no mitzvah of yibum. That wouldn't be true in the situation where they were married to a random guy when they were married to Adam. Therefore, we don't have any mistake. But that's why we could not use the word osos, we had to use the word potros. Alright, now, the Gemara's next linguistic issue is, why do we say that they don't have chalitza or yibum? That's a strange language. First of all, why did we say chalitza altogether? Just say that there's no mitzvah of yibum, and we can figure out if there's no mitzvah of yibum, there's no mitzvah of chalitza, because chalitza is only meant to be a release for yibum. So Gemara says, no, if you only say there's no yibum, I would think that they do have to do chalitza. This teaches me then that in a situation where there's no yibum, there's no chalitza. That's something that we learned from here. Now, Rashi points out there are situations in which we say that someone has to do chalitza and not yibum, but that's not because there is a deraisa obligation of chalitza when there's no deraisa obligation of yibum. The real reason for that is because there's a suffix. We don't know if they have chalitza or yibum, and therefore chalitza you don't have anything to lose. Yibum you do, so we don't allow them to do yibum, we allow them to do chalitza. Alright, so the Gemara says, okay, I understand why you had to say yibum and chalitza, but why did you say chalitza first, and why did you say yibum altogether? Why don't you just say that they don't have to do chalitza? They don't have to do chalitza, it means that there's no yibum. So the Gemara answers, we wanted to say chalitza and yibum, and say chalitza first to show that chalitza takes precedence over yibum. We really prefer that everybody do chalitza, even though the Torah times yibum was preferable. In our times, we're afraid people have wrong intention, and this is halacha said by Abba Shaul. We're afraid that they will marry this woman not in intent to fulfill the mitzvah of yibum, but with intent to be married to her, and that is a situation of somebody marrying his brother's wife not l'shem mitzvah, and that Abba Shaul says is close to making a mamzer. It's almost an illegal marriage, and therefore we say people should do chalitza to avoid a situation like that. Alright, now the Gemara wants to know, why does it say a number? Now the Mishnah starts off by saying there are 15 women, 15 relations, and it ends off by saying these are the ones that are pater and pater their tsaros. So Gemara says, why do you have to say twice? That's two exclusory phrases, listing 15, only these 15 and not others, and then saying these are the ones, it's only these and not others. What two are we excluding? Gemara says, well, we're excluding the ones that are held by Rav and Ravasi. Rav and Ravasi each have an example of someone who is not falling to yibum, and paters their tzara. What are their examples? So, Rav says that if Shimon is married to two women, and one of them is a sota, so if she's a sota, and now Shimon, let's restart. If Ruvain is married to two women, and one of them is a sota, then Ruvain dies, the sota does not fall to yibum. She doesn't have a full-fledged marriage to Reuven anymore. She's blocked from being able to be with him, and therefore she doesn't fall to yibum to Shimon. Says Rav, that sota's tzara also doesn't fall to yibum. That's a chiddush of Rav. Our Mishnah is showing that that's not true. Rav Asi's halacha is that if a woman's an islandess, a woman who cannot bear children at all, she is no mitzvah of yibum, because the whole point of yibum is to have another child, and that child should perpetuate the name of the brother who died without kids. If she's an islandess, if she can't bear children, there's no mitzvah of yibum. Says Rav Asi, that islandess' tzara also does not have a mitzvah of yibum. Those two halachos, our Mishnah doesn't list. So Gemara says, okay, that's good for us, but it's not good for Rav and Rav Asi. So the Gemara says, okay, we still need two exceptions. So there's two more exceptions, and that is a tzaras mima enes and a tzaras machzor gushasai. Tsaras Mima'enes is where Reuven is married to two women, one of whom is a Kitana. She's a minor who was married off not by her father because her father was gone, she's an orphan, but by her mother or brothers. That's only a Rabbanon marriage. She can pull out of that marriage whenever she wants. She can refuse the marriage. If she does that, there is no Yibum anymore. And her Tzara also is not allowed to do Yibum in a case like that. That paters the Tzara. That's another halacha that's excluded from the Mishnah. And the other possible halacha is machzor grushase, where somebody married a woman illegally, but it was only a lav. That is where Reuven was married to a woman, then he divorced her, then she married somebody else, got divorced from him, and then came back and married Reuven. That second marriage is forbidden, and there is no mitzvah of yibum there. The Mishnah is excluding that. That does not pater the tzara. Now, the Gemara points out, interestingly, that Rav and Ravasi might not hold of each other. So if they don't hold of each other, then they could each use the other one's case and say that's what the Mishnah is excluded. And we need one more because there's two exclusions, one of these two, either the Tsaras Mima'enes or the Tsaras Machzor Grushase. If, however, they hold of each other, then they would both have to hold of these two are the ones that are excluded. So the Gemara just wants to know, according to Rav Asi and Rav, that they hold of their cases, that of the Islandist and the Sota. Why, according to them, does the Mishnah not mention it? The Gemara says the Mishnah doesn't mention it because there's no possibility of a Tsaras Tzara. That is, the co-wife of the co-wife. The only situation in which you could have a Tsaras Tzara is if the co-wife, that is, Reuven's co-wife, who was pater from doing Yibum to Shimon because of the erva that Shimon is related to, but that does not pater that tzara from doing Yibum to Levi, because both women fall to Yibum to Levi. The erva is only an erva to Shimon, not to Levi. So if the tzara then goes and does Yibum with Levi, and Levi has an additional third woman as a wife, those two are now tzaros, and one of them was a tzaras tzara of Shimon's erva when that woman was married to Reuven. If then Levi goes and dies without children, those two women will fall back to Shimon. One of them is a tzaras tzara in the original marriage to Reuven. One of them is a tzaras erva, that is, in the original marriage to Reuven. The other one is a tzaras tzara, and she's pater from Yibum for the reason of being a tzaras erva. That cannot apply in the two cases of Rav and Ravasi, because those two women can never fall to Yibum to any brother, not to Shimon and not to Levi, because the reason that they don't fall to Yibum is because there's something wrong with their marriage to Reuven. One was a Sota and one's an Islandist. Therefore, it's not listed in this Mishnah. The Mishnah only wanted cases where you could have a woman fall to Yibum to a third brother, not to the second brother, and therefore you could have a case of Tzaras Tzara. Alright, this concludes the Gemara's linguistic issues. The Gemara now talks about what is the source of these halacha. So, the Gemara says, first of all, how do we know that a relation, an erva relationship, does not have a mitzvah of Yibum? The Gemara says that's learned from the fact that the word aleha appears both in describing forbidden relationships, specifically that of a woman's sister, your wife's sister. It's forbidden to someone to marry his wife's sister while she's alive. And the word aleha is used here. It says isha lachos lesikach litzor lagalos ervasa aleha bechaya. The word aleha. And in discussing the mitzvah of Yibum, it says Yevama Yavai aleha. So the Gemara says, the Josh says as follows: where it says the case of aleha, which represents the mitzvah of Yibum, that's what we're talking about when we say that one should not marry his sister's wife, his wife's sister, that is, and therefore it is specifically telling us don't do Yibum in that case. So even though you have a mitzvah of Yibum, if it is a forbidden relation, you cannot do it. The Gemara says, great, that's the source for the Achos Isha, the sister of the wife. How do you know, though, that this applies to all the other 14 forbidden relationships on the list? So the Gemara says we look at what causes this Isser in the case of Achos Isha, and that is the fact that it is a relationship called Arayos, that it is forbidden by Kares, and if it's done by accident, then it's Chatas. So therefore, any such situation also counts, and therefore that includes the other 14 as well, and it limits to those 14. The Gemara says, 1 second, there are 6 other areas that aren't mentioned on the list. Now, we know why they're not on the list, and that's because they cannot possibly be married to the brother legally, and therefore not at all, because it would not be any legal status of marriage. Those are something like, for example, the mother. She couldn't be married to Reuven and be Shimon's mother. So you can't have a situation like that. That's why these 6 are not on the list. However, we should potentially learn from this pasuk that they should pater their tzaras. that if they are married to someone else, who they are allowed to marry, some stranger, let's say Adam, and there's a tzara, that they would create the situation of a tzaras erva, and therefore if that tzara somehow ends up falling to Yibam through marrying Reuven later, that they would not fall to Yibam because they would be a tzaras erva based on a previous unrelated marriage. How do you know that that's not true? Because that's not true because, again, we use the narrow definition specifically of the Achos Ishto, and that is that they are able to do the marriage to the brother, and the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. So only that situation is a situation where you have this patur.